Hey guys, it's Buddha Gem, and this is another response to Bezel333, the naughty Christian who is continuing his videos on the book by A.L. De Silva, Buddhist Critique of Christianity. And he starts out by, he's so surprised that Buddhists like myself and Gautama Guru, had negative things to say. Buddhists, I know, we're supposed to just, everything's okay. I know there's this like mystique or whatever it is about Buddhists, that everything's just hunky-dory. And it's not. That's not Buddhism. But the reason we had negative things to say is because he clearly quotes De Silva out of context in his last video. And I made that clear in my video. He leaves out a significant sentence in the paragraph where De Silva says, look, I'm not saying that Jesus never existed. I'm merely pointing out that there is no independent evidence that he did. That's all he's saying. And by leaving that out, he clearly misleads the viewer. Okay, that's what what's negative about that? It's not negative. It's constructive criticism. It's like, hey, you're being deceitful by leaving that phrase out. Just like if I tell you that, Jesus preached for you to hate your mother and father, be telling the truth. But, every Christian I know would go, hey, you got to put that in context. Or if I said Jesus said he didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. That is, he wasn't this Prince of Peace. I could quote things like that. But Christians would, of course, adamantly object because it's out of context. That's my criticism. Secondly, my criticism of Bezel is that he's talking about things he obviously doesn't understand or know anything about. This latest video, for instance, he starts off telling everyone that there are 4 fundamental principles of Buddhism. So I'm like, yeah, okay, that's right. The 4 Noble Truths. Well, he never calls them that in his video. And he begins, the first one he says is the first principle of Buddhism. He doesn't call it, but the first noble truth is that after we die, we are reborn. Huh? That's not one of the 4 fundamental principles of Buddhism. The 4 noble truths, which are shared by all Buddhists of different schools, different sects, different traditions, that are fundamental to Buddhism, are 1, that life is inevitably fraught with suffering. 2, that the cause for that suffering is our ignorance and our desires, our cravings, for permanence, really. We want things to be permanent that aren't. And I can get into that a little bit. I just don't have the time. The 3rd noble truth is the good news, basically, that Nirvana, you guys have all heard of it, that there is a way to end this cycle, the cyclical cycle of suffering. And the 4th noble truth is the remedy or the prescription by the Buddha. So he essentially treats life's existential dilemma or problem as a doctor would. He recognizes the problem, finds its source or its cause, realizes that there is a cure for it, and then recommends the cure, the Noble Eightfold Path. Clearly, Bezel doesn't know any of this, and that's fine. I mean, he's a Christian. I don't expect him to know that. But then, on the same level, I don't expect him to do videos about something he doesn't know anything about. He goes on in this big thing, talking about this idea of rebirth in Buddhism. And there's so much to dissect here. Buddhism denies the personal identity of a human being. There's no personal identity. That speaks to the lack of inherent dignity of a human. I don't even know what to say with this. I mean, Buddhism doesn't deny the personal identity of a human being. I mean, the Buddhist canon, which is the Pali Canon, Bezel, it's not A.L. De Silva's book. If you want to critique Buddhism, why don't you go to the Pali Canon? I could find a million crazy Christians that have written all kinds of crazy stuff and critique Christianity, but I don't think that'd be very valid, right? I could quote David Koresh or Jehovah's Witnesses, or you get my drift. And I'm not saying A.L. De Silva's a whack job or anything, but and I'm sure De Silva would agree with what I'm saying. If you want to critique the Buddha's teachings, critique his teachings, not what his followers say, but what the actual teachings are. And to do that, you'd have to understand them. So, one, I don't have time. I'm just going to leave it at this, that you don't understand rebirth. Second, you could be a lying, cheating, murderer. He doesn't understand karma. This idea, he gives this example, like, I could be reborn as a toad, then I'd die as a toad, and then bam, I'd be reborn as a human. That's not the way it works. It's not any Buddhist idea. So I'm just, I'm running out of time here. Life is suffering. Craving, wanting, desire make us human, he said. The problem is not, here's an interesting part, and this gets to the root of what I'm saying. Bezel just doesn't understand what he's talking about, but he at one point he says, the problem is not that we desire, but what we desire. Bezel, Buddhist would agree with that. That is the Buddhist understanding. It's not all desire. Obviously, being a Buddhist, I have certain desires, like to end suffering, to practice the Dhamma, different things like that. That is a good desire. Unfortunately, you don't understand this, so you think all desire is bad. Well, certainly there is some desire to do good, to practice good, to do these things, and that is good. So, again, it would help if you understood these things before you made a video about them. So, again, Buddhists would agree with that sentiment. Suffering can be overcome. He again, doesn't understand the concept of Nirvana. The Buddha teaches that's the highest happiness, the ending of suffering and craving. And he says, if you come to this point where you no longer crave or desire, what are you? Well, the problem is you're approaching this from a position of ignorance. Such a question, as understood by the Buddha, it's like, it's not that like Bezel's stupid. We've all experienced this at some point in our lives where you have so little information, so little understanding of something that you ask a really stupid question. I mean, no questions are stupid, but you don't have enough information to even sometimes articulate an intelligent question. And that's what Bezel's doing. There's a lot tied up in Indian culture and in understanding the concept of Nirvana. I clearly don't have the time to discuss this. So what I just wanted to say to Bezel is, look, it's fine. It seems like you're trying to understand this, but to do so, I'd really recommend looking at the Buddha's teachings, not just what Buddhists have written, but really look at what the Buddha taught. Like when I talk about Jesus, I don't talk about what Jerry Falwell or Pat Robertson or you say Jesus taught. I would go to the Bible and I'd say, look, Jesus said, bop, 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 And as a Buddhist, that's what I'm asking you to do. If you want to critique Buddhism, go to the source of the teachings themselves, the Pali Canon, the Tipitaka, the collection of the Buddhist teachings, the oldest extant collection of the Buddhist teachings, and critique it from that point of view, but with an understanding of what you're critiquing, So I just wanted to put that out there. There's a lot I could, elaborate on. I just don't have the time or the energy. But again, please, Bezel, understand that you're not understanding what's being talked about here very well. So I'm going to leave it at that. I've rambled long enough. But, alright, peace.